know that I don't condone Rogers' conduct, and I hope Psycho Stu can forgive me, myself. You know, it's hard for me to talk about it, but you know, I'm just keeping 100. You know, I feel bad about what happened to Psycho Stu.
And just leave. Somebody who pull me off of him will leave. I'm telling you, I'm gonna hit him as many times as I can. Watch. No, they didn't tell me to fake hit him. They said I could hit him for real. Yeah, they allowed me to hit him for real. If he hits me back for real, I don't give a.
Like, Rampage is a friend of mine, bro. I'm not about to bash his son on the internet for views. Like, y'all bro.
Rampage Jackson's family drama just exploded into one of the wildest scandals the fight world has seen in years. His son Raja is at the center of a $40 million lawsuit, a criminal investigation, and a storm of backlash after a wrestling stunt spiraled into a near-fatal beatdown caught live on camera. What started as a routine wrestling show ended with a decorated Army veteran in critical condition, a once-respected MMA family under fire, and Rampage himself scrambling to defend his son while fighting off accusations of bad parenting, racism, and career collapse. And the deeper you go, the messier it gets, because this isn't just about a fight. It's about legacies, money, and the kind of scandal that can erase everything Rampage ever built. On August 23rd, 2025, what was supposed to be just another night at the Knox X Pro Wrestling Academy in Los Angeles turned into pure chaos. Fans packed the small venue expecting theatrics, chair shots, and maybe a few surprise appearances. What they didn't expect was a real-life beatdown so violent it left a man fighting for his life and the Jackson family staring down, the kind of scandal you can't just walk away from. Raja Jackson, son of MMA legend Rampage Jackson, showed up that night unannounced. At first, people thought he was just there to watch the show. Cameras even caught him lingering backstage, streaming to his Kick followers and dropping cryptic comments about getting his lick back on one of the wrestlers. That wrestler? Stuart Psycho Stu Smith, a retired U.S. Army veteran, beloved by fans, and someone who used wrestling as more than just entertainment. For Stu, the ring was therapy. After serving his country and battling PTSD, wrestling gave him structure, a community, and a way to channel his trauma into performance. That night, he was supposed to be in character, putting on a show for the crowd like he had countless times before. But one unscripted moment set the entire disaster in motion. During a match, Stu, fully in gimmick, cracked a beer can across Raja's head. To seasoned wrestling fans, this was nothing shocking. It's called working the gimmick, a staged move meant to rile the crowd and keep the storyline alive. But here's the problem. Raja wasn't a trained pro wrestler. He's an MMA fighter with a real combat background, and he didn't see it as part of the act. He took it personal. That's when everything unraveled. With the crowd still buzzing from the beer can spot, Raja stormed into the ring mid-match. Witnesses say his face was locked with rage as he slapped Stu to the mat, mounted him, and unleashed a barrage of over 20 punches straight to his face. This wasn't wrestling. This was a cage fight in the middle of a scripted show, and the crowd went from cheering to horrified in seconds. Security scrambled, but by the time they pulled Raja off, the damage was done. Fans in the front rows later described seeing blood pouring from Stu's face, with some even claiming it leaked from his ears. The veteran was motionless on the mat, unconscious, and minutes later, reports came through that he had flatlined in the ring. Wrestlers and medics rushed to revive him, but the atmosphere had shifted. What was supposed to be an evening of entertainment had turned into a near-death scene, broadcast live across Raja's Kick stream for thousands to witness. Within hours, the fallout began. LAPD confirmed they were investigating the incident as a potential felony assault. Social media exploded with clips of the attack, fans debating whether this was a setup gone wrong or straight-up attempted murder. And as Stu lay in critical condition at the hospital, Raja wasn't showing remorse. He was on livestream bragging about how he got his payback. That single night didn't just leave one man fighting for his life. It lit the fuse on a scandal that could cost Raja his freedom, drain Rampage's fortune, and stain the Jackson name forever. The second Raja stormed out of that ring, the internet lit up. Fans who had been live in the venue, already shaken by the sight of Psycho Stu lying motionless in a pool of blood, were uploading clips within minutes. Some were shaky phone recordings, others were ripped directly from Raja's kick livestream. But no matter the angle, the footage was brutal. Raja on top of Stu, pounding his face into the mat while security scrambled to pull him away. And as those clips spread, the outrage was instant. Twitter, TikTok, and Reddit were flooded with reactions. One fan wrote, "This wasn't wrestling. This was an attempted murder in the middle of show. Raja Jackson just ruined his career and maybe someone's life." Another posted, "I was front row. I heard the cracks. He didn't stop. Dude was lifeless. This wasn't entertainment. It was disturbing." Hashtags like hashtag ban Raja Jackson and hashtag justice for Stu started trending by the end of the night as people debated whether Raja was set up by promoters or if he simply snapped and took it too far. But if fans were waiting for an apology, what they got only poured gasoline on the fire. Minutes after the match ended, Raja went live again. His stream chat was flooded with horrified viewers asking if Stu was okay, begging him to explain. And Raja's cold response? Just 2 words, "My bad." Delivered flat. No remorse, like he had just knocked over a drink instead of leaving a man unconscious in the ring. That clip alone went viral on Twitter and TikTok within hours, racking up millions of views and sparking furious commentary. One fan tweeted, "Imagine watching a man flatline and then brushing it off with a 'my bad.' This guy is heartless." Another said, "Raja Jackson's response will go down as one of the coldest, most disgusting things I've ever seen on livestream." Screenshots of his face during that livestream, calm, even smug, were plastered all over social media. Memes started rolling in, but they weren't funny. They were angry, painting Raja as a soulless villain who thought attempted murder was content. And then came the career-crushing blow. Kick announced it was permanently banning Raja's channel. The very platform he used to broadcast the assault was the first to cut ties, citing extreme violence and violation of community standards. For Raja, that wasn't just a suspension, it was the loss of one of his biggest income streams. Overnight, he went from an MMA fighter trying to build an online following to a man blacklisted by one of the fastest-growing streaming platforms. But the internet wasn't finished with him. Fans began digging up old clips, resurfacing Raja's past trash talk, his anger issues, even moments where he bragged about not knowing how to fake fight. Every video became evidence in the court of public opinion that Raja was reckless, violent, and dangerous. Threads on Reddit ran thousands of comments deep, dissecting every frame of the footage, with users pointing out the blood dripping from Stu's ears, the moment his body went limp, the expression on Raja's face when he got up. By the next morning, it wasn't just MMA fans talking, it was the mainstream. TMZ ran the clip. ESPN covered it. Combat Sports podcasts devoted emergency episodes to the scandal. And while Raja tried to stay quiet after his infamous "my bad," the damage was already done. His name was trending worldwide, but for all the wrong reasons. What should have been a forgettable indie wrestling show had now turned into a viral nightmare. And with Stu's condition still critical, the public's anger was only growing. The narrative wasn't just about a fight gone wrong anymore. It was about a fighter who live-streamed violence, laughed it off, and then watched his platform vanish overnight. And the scariest part? This was just the beginning. As the viral firestorm raged, all eyes turned to one man, Quentin "Rampage" Jackson, MMA legend, UFC Hall of Famer, and most importantly, Raja's father. For years, Rampage had carried himself as a fighter who spoke his mind, sometimes reckless, sometimes comedic, but always larger than life. Now he was staring down the ugliest PR nightmare of his career, not because of his own actions, but because of his son's. The first statement came quickly. Within 24 hours of the incident, Rampage released a video on Instagram. Sitting in a dimly lit room, voice heavy with disappointment, Rampage looked into the camera and said, "This was never supposed to happen. Wrestling is about entertainment. It's about performance. Things got out of hand, emotions ran high, and a moment that was meant to be a work turned into something it wasn't. Our family sends prayers to Stu and his loved ones. Raja made a mistake, but he's not a monster." The tone was calm, almost rehearsed, damage control at its most basic. Rampage framed it as a misunderstanding, the line between reality and performance blurred. Fans were divided. Some appreciated the attempt at accountability. Others saw it as nothing more than spin. One comment under the post read, "Call what you want, Rampage, but your son nearly killed a man." That wasn't a work, that was a beating. But as Stu's condition worsened in the hospital, sympathy for Raja evaporated. And Rampage's tone shifted too. Days later, the MMA veteran went live on his own stream. This time fiery, emotional, and visibly angry at the backlash. "Y'all acting like Raja is some kind of criminal. He's my son. He's a fighter. And you know damn well if this wasn't a black man, y'all wouldn't be talking about attempted murder. Wrestling is dangerous. Fights get messy. But now it's suddenly a crime? Miss me with that racist double standard. I will never abandon my son." The clip went everywhere. Rampage was no longer apologizing. He was defending, even justifying. To him, the issue wasn't Raja's actions. It was how the media and fans were framing them. And the message was clear. He was ready to fight the narrative just as fiercely as he fought in the cage. But that defiance came at a cost. MMA commentators, sports journalists, and even Rampage's former colleagues lined up to criticize him. ESPN analyst Chael Sonnen didn't mince words. "This is enabling. Rampage is defending violence, not condemning it. That's not how you stand by your son. That's how you make things worse." Ariel Helwani called Rampage's comments tone deaf, noting that Stu was still in critical condition. MMA Fighting ran a headline that read, "Rampage chooses family over accountability." Even inside the wrestling community, backlash mounted. Promoters began distancing themselves from Raja, with one indie booker tweeting, "If Rampage wants to believe this was racism, fine. But let's be real, what happened in that ring wasn't a performance. It was a crime. Nobody wants Raja near their locker room." The father-son dynamic, once a source of pride, was now a double-edged sword. Rampage's loyalty was unquestionable, but his public defense made him look less like a concerned parent and more like an accomplice to his son's recklessness. The longer he spoke, the worse the optics became. Instead of calming the fire, Rampage poured gasoline on it. And with every headline, every angry tweet, and every fan dissecting his words, the Jackson family name, once respected in MMA circles, was being dragged through the mud. The story was no longer just about Raja's violent outburst. It was about Rampage, his refusal to back down, and the growing perception that both father and son were out of touch with reality. The stage was set for the next chapter, not just a scandal about violence in the ring, but a family at war with public opinion. While Raja and Rampage were fighting their battle in the media, the other side of this story finally came into focus. And it wasn't about hype, excuses, or PR spin. It was about the man lying in a hospital bed, fighting for his life. Psycho Stu, real name Steven Stu Ramirez, was more than just a local fan favorite. He was a U.S. Army veteran who had survived 2 tours overseas. Those tours left him with scars you couldn't always see. PTSD, nightmares, a constant struggle to adjust back to civilian life. Wrestling had become his outlet. Inside the ring, Stu wasn't broken. He was whole. The gimmick Psycho Stu, the unpredictable, wild brawler, wasn't just a character. It was therapy, his way of taking chaos and turning it into something that could make people cheer. And for Stu, it wasn't just about the fans. Wrestling was how he provided for his family. His wife, Contessa, and their 2 young kids depended on that income. It wasn't much. Indie wrestling rarely is, but it kept food on the table, the lights on, and most importantly, it gave Stu a purpose. That purpose was shattered on August 23rd. Doctors confirmed the extent of his injuries in the days after Raja's assault. multiple facial fractures, broken orbital bone, shattered nose, 3 teeth knocked clean out, severe concussion, with internal bleeding that required emergency intervention. And the worst part, his spine had suffered damage during the attack, leaving doctors unsure if he would ever wrestle, or even move, normally again. What was billed as a match had turned into a career-ending, life-altering tragedy. Then came the GoFundMe. Contessa Ramirez, Stu's wife, uploaded a photo of her husband in the hospital. Tubes in his nose, face swollen, bruises spreading across his cheeks and jaw. In the caption, her words hit harder than any punch Raja threw. My husband served this country. He fought his demons through wrestling. And now, because of one man's reckless violence, our family is facing the worst fight of our lives. Stu may never step in a ring again. He may never wrestle with our kids in the backyard again. We're asking for prayers, for support, for help. Because without him, we don't know how we're going to make it. The GoFundMe spread like wildfire. Thousands of fans donated, many leaving comments about how Stu's matches had inspired them, how his story as a veteran battling PTSD gave them hope. One donor wrote, "Stu, you fought for us. Now it's time for us to fight for you." Another said, "As a vet with PTSD, watching you wrestle gave me strength. We got your back, brother." The contrast couldn't have been sharper. On one side, Raja and Rampage, dismissive, defensive, spinning. On the other, Stu and his family, broken but brave, standing in front of the world with nothing but honesty. As more details about Stu's condition came out, the outrage deepened. Reporters highlighted the irony. A man who survived combat zones might lose everything because of a wrestling match meant to entertain a livestream audience. Wrestling wasn't supposed to destroy his life. It was supposed to save it. For fans, this became the emotional anchor of the story. Raja wasn't just a reckless fighter anymore. He was the man who crushed a veteran's dream, who took away a father's ability to provide for his family. And with Contessa's tearful video update, her voice cracking as she said, "We just want him home. We just want him safe," the narrative was locked in. Stu wasn't just a victim. He was a symbol of everything that Raja had taken too far. And now, with Stu's recovery stretching into months, maybe years, the question wasn't just whether Raja would face consequences. It was whether Stu and his family could ever rebuild their lives from the wreckage left in that ring. By the first week of September, the headlines had shifted from wrestling gone wrong to something far more serious. Felony charges, lawsuits, and the kind of dollar figures that could ruin an entire family legacy. The LAPD, which had initially labeled the August 23rd incident as an active assault investigation, confirmed through a press release that they were now working with the district attorney's office to pursue felony charges against Raja Jackson. Insiders whispered that the DEA was weighing charges as severe as attempted murder, not just aggravated assault, given the brutality of the attack and the fact that Stu had flatlined in the ring. Prosecutors pointed out that Raja wasn't some untrained hothead. He was a trained MMA fighter. That meant his fists were legally considered deadly weapons. In other words, this wasn't going to be brushed off as boys being boys. This was a potential felony case with prison time on the line. And the legal heat didn't stop there. Stu's wife Contessa and their legal team filed a civil lawsuit seeking $40 million in damages, a staggering number that covered lost income, lifelong medical expenses, emotional suffering, and punitive damages. In their filing, the Ramirez family's attorney laid it out bluntly. Mr. Ramirez is a decorated veteran, a husband, and a father whose livelihood was stolen from him through reckless, unlawful violence. This was not part of the show. This was a brutal, intentional assault that left him permanently disabled. The $40 million figure sent shockwaves through the MMA and wrestling communities. Could Raja ever pay that? Probably not. But the name attached to him, his father, Rampage Jackson, suddenly looked like a lifeline for lawyers. Legal analysts speculated that if Raja couldn't cover the damages, plaintiffs would come after Rampage's fortune. His properties, his investments, his sponsorship money, all of it could be on the table. One TMZ analyst even put it bluntly. Rampage could lose everything he built in the cage because of his son's actions in the ring. But then came another wrinkle. one that put the spotlight not just on Raja, but on the entire promotion. Wrestling insiders started whispering that Raja's outburst may not have been entirely spontaneous. Multiple wrestlers claimed that promoters had encouraged Raja to work snug, industry slang for hitting harder to make things look more realistic. One anonymous wrestler even told the Wrestling Observer, they told him, don't pull your shots, show people you're legit. That was the vibe. But he didn't just work snug, he tried to kill the guy. That gray area created a massive liability question. If Raja was told to hit for real, did that make the promotion complicit? Could they be dragged into Stu's lawsuit? Lawyers debated whether Stu had signed any waiver that would protect the Academy from liability, but most agreed that no waiver in the world covers a deliberate assault broadcast live on the internet. Meanwhile, Raja himself wasn't helping his case. His "My Bad" livestream clip had already gone viral, and prosecutors were reportedly preparing to use it as evidence of callousness, proof that he showed no remorse. Sponsors and promoters distanced themselves in record time. Gyms pulled their affiliations. Kick not only banned his channel, but announced they were permanently severing ties. That meant Raja's primary income stream evaporated overnight. And as Stu lay in the hospital with mounting medical bills and his wife pleading for help on GoFundMe, the image of Raja laughing on livestream while his father defended him began to look less like family loyalty and more like enabling. Legal experts predicted a brutal road ahead. Years of courtroom battles, tens of millions in damages, and the looming possibility that Raja could face decades in prison. For Rampage, that meant more than just standing by his son emotionally. It meant possibly sacrificing his fortune, his reputation, and his legacy, all for one night that should have been just another indie wrestling show. The story was no longer just about violence in the ring. It had become a full-blown legal war, and one that could bankrupt the Jackson name while rewriting the boundaries of what wrestlers, promoters, and fighters could get away with in the name of entertainment. By mid-September, the legal wheels were turning, but the industry backlash was already in full swing. What had started as a shocking clip on Kick was now shaping into a cultural flashpoint across wrestling, MMA, and streaming. The first domino to fall was the Wrestling Academy itself, the very place where Raja snapped. Their official Twitter, or X, account dropped a statement that read more like a disowning than a PR cleanup. We are horrified by the actions of Raja Jackson on August 23rd. What occurred in our ring was not sanctioned, not scripted, and not acceptable in any form. Our academy is committed to safety, therapy, and respect. We are working closely with investigators, and effective immediately, Raja is permanently banned from all future events. The academy's stance was clear. They wanted nothing to do with Raja. But to some fans, the statement rang hollow. Clips began surfacing of old training sessions where wrestlers were encouraged to go harder, feeding speculation that the promoters had looked the other way until things went too far. Meanwhile, in the MMA world, Raja's father Rampage Jackson was facing his own reckoning. Commentators torched him on podcasts and ESPN panels. Former UFC rival Chael Sonnen mocked Rampage's defense of his son. This isn't a fight camp. This isn't sparring. This was a dude beating on a vet with PTSD and laughing about it. If Rampage thinks that's racism, then he's lost the plot. Other analysts piled on, accusing Rampage of enabling Raja and refusing to hold him accountable. What stung worse was that some of Rampage's longtime allies in the fight game began quietly stepping back, unwilling to risk their own reputations by being linked to the scandal. Then came the streaming world, a space that had been Raja's bread and butter. Kick had already banned him, but the conversation spilled over to Twitch, YouTube, and TikTok, where streamer Myron stepped into the firestorm. Known for courting controversy, Myron went live and said he wouldn't bash Raja, claiming everyone makes mistakes and calling it just a fight gone too far. The reaction was nuclear. On one side, Raja's defenders rallied behind Myron, spamming hashtags like #FreeRaja, and insisting the beatdown was being exaggerated by soft fans and media bias. On the other side, critics torched Myron for downplaying the suffering of a disabled veteran, calling him heartless and demanding sponsors drop him too. Myron doubled down, relishing the attention, but it only poured more gasoline on the already raging fire. And while the public clashed online, sponsors quietly made their moves in the shadows. Energy drink brands, supplement companies, and fitness equipment sponsors that had partnered with Rampage for years began ghosting him. No public statements, no drama, just quiet withdrawals of contracts, delays in renewals, and phone calls that went unreturned. Rampage himself admitted on a live stream, "Some of y'all acting like I got the plague now. Nobody want to answer the phone." By this point, the backlash wasn't just about Raja anymore. It was about accountability, reputation, and optics. Wrestling fans demanded to know if promoters were complicit. MMA fans questioned Rampage's moral compass. Streamers debated whether defending Raja was brave or disgraceful. And the general public, many of whom had never watched indie wrestling a day in their lives, saw the viral clips and landed on one conclusion. This wasn't sports. This wasn't entertainment. This was a family name, a legacy, and a livelihood going up in flames. All because one man lost control and another man refused to admit it. By the end of September, the dust still hadn't settled. Raja Jackson's name was splattered across headlines, Reddit threads, and YouTube thumbnails. But the scandal had morphed into something bigger than just one man's mistake. Because at this point, it wasn't just about Raja. It was about Rampage Jackson himself. For decades, Rampage had built his reputation as one of MMA's most electrifying fighters, a legend who brawled with the best and turned chaos into entertainment. He'd parlayed that fame into business ventures, streaming deals, and properties that should have set his family up for life. But now, every time the Jackson name trended online, it wasn't about highlight reel knockouts or championship belts. It was about Raja's bloody meltdown in a wrestling ring and the veteran who may never walk the same again. The damage to Raja's future was undeniable. Kick had banned him. Twitch and YouTube weren't touching him. Any dream of crossing into MMA or pro wrestling was dead on arrival. No promoter was going to risk the PR nightmare. Even casual fight fans online were saying things like, Raja Jackson is blackballed before his career even started. But the fallout didn't stop there. Legal experts pointed out that if Stu's $40 million lawsuit stuck, and if felony charges turned into a conviction, Rampage's entire fortune could be on the chopping block. His fight purses, his homes, his brand deals, all potentially drained away in court settlements and damages. And with sponsors already retreating, the flow of new money was drying up fast. The scarier part? Rampage's legacy itself was now tied to this scandal. Instead of his Hall of Fame career being remembered for wild knockouts and unforgettable trash talk, conversations were shifting. Documentaries, podcasts, and MMA panels were asking, is Rampage Jackson an all-time great? Or just another fighter who lost it all trying to cover for his son? That question burned deeper because Rampage wasn't letting go. He was standing by Raja publicly, no matter how ugly the optics became. And that loyalty, while admirable to some, was painting him as an enabler to others. Every defense, every excuse, every interview where he blamed racism or shady promoters instead of Raja's actions, it all kept the scandal alive and kept Rampage tied to it. And so, the story ended up here. Not just about one violent night, but about a family name hanging in the balance. Because when you strip away the tweets, the live streams, and the legal jargon, the bigger question remains. Backhand index pointing right. Was Raja Jackson just a pawn caught in the dangerous mix of shady indie promoters and blurred lines between wrestling and real violence? Backhand index pointing right, or did he cross the line into outright attempted murder with no way back? And if the latter is true, then the harshest question of all, backhand index pointing right, can Rampage Jackson, the legend, the father, the fighter, ever recover his reputation? Or will his son's meltdown erase his legacy for good? This isn't just about a wrestling ring anymore. This is about a dynasty on the verge of collapse.